The Nike Zoom X Alphafly versus the Nike Air Zoom Tempo Next Percent. Pros, cons, why I think the trainer is also a competitor to the Alphafly. Let's begin. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the vlog. My name is Filip Latocha. Today, as you can guess by the title, we are comparing the Alphafly versus the Tempo Next Percent. And because the Mango Next Percent has made its cameo in this video, you have to smash the like button. It's just the rule on this channel. So that being said, smash the like button, like and subscribe. You guys know how this goes. If you're a continued watcher of the videos and the channel, thanks so much. Love you guys very much. So that being said, yeah, basically the point of this video is going to be talking about the RACER versus its trainer. Pros, cons, similarities, differences, in addition to why I think at a non-elite level, the Tempo Next Percent has a competitive edge to it against the Alphafly. So, hear me out. This is going to be a crazy take, again, because, yes, you know how these videos go. So, first things first, I'm going to leave the specs for the shoes right here, respectively. So, we'll just talk about the specs if need to be, but I will leave them up there for the comparison. And note to self, those are for 8.5 size shoes. They kind of fluctuate depending on what size shoe you have, if it's a woman's shoe, etc., etc. So, okay, first things first, let's compare similarities. So, obviously, the shoes are going to have a lot of similarities with them because one is designed to be the trainer for the RACER. That's an obvious fact. So, as you can tell, they both look very similar, but when you start, really breaking it down, they are slightly different. But the principal design of both shoes is to have the Air Zoom pocket here with some kind of plate in the shoe with a Flyknit upper and some kind of heel support depending on the shoe, what foams are used ultimately in it. So that's one of the major differences immediately off the bat between both shoes is that, we'll start with the Alphafly here in this case. The Air Zoom pockets do obviously exist in the shoe. It has a huge chunk of ZoomX running all the way across the shoe, a carbon plate that's going through the shoe as well with a 4mm drop ultimately. So it feels a lot more neutral than per se the Tempo Next Percent. Also a major difference is that from the Air Zoom pockets here on the shoe, there's an opening here, more or less this gap. So it kind of prevents more or less this rolling motion in the shoe from feeling good, where you're going to have this little bump point here. So this ultimately, I think, causes the shoe to lose a little bit of weight. And I don't really have a big issue with it because, again, I'm more of a mid-foot, forefoot kind of striker, so this gap here doesn't really matter all too much for me. But ultimately, the design with the ZoomX is to have a light, springy, extremely powerful foam in the shoe overall, because on race day, you want to just have as much power as possible, of course. So that being said, in the Tempo Next Percent, there's a lot more React on this shoe. So again, air pockets still here in the midfoot area of the shoe. We do have a small layer of ZoomX running across here. We have ZoomX running in this like midfoot rear area of the shoe. And then we have React running here as a baseline area of the foam. And we also have React in the heel. So that's kind of significant to note. Of course, when you're heel striking, if you are heel striking in this shoe, for that matter, you're going to have a little bit more support here, of course, also with these additional rubber guards on the bottom of the heel, and you have a lot more rubber, I would say, in this midfoot, forefoot area ultimately. And as you can tell by this shoe that I'm almost like 200 miles into it, I've done some shred, and we'll compare the shred on the shoes later. But the bottoms are very similar for both shoes in the case that they got a similar pattern, and it's ultimately designed to have you have a compressive and decompressive motion using the Air Zoom pockets and the ZoomX in tandem to give you that nice springy feel. So now let's talk about some of the differences with the shoes. One of the major ones, of course, in the uppers is not so much the design of what it looks like, but the material that's being used. So in this case, the Alphafly is using Atom Knit in the upper, which is ultimately preventing water, moisture absorption in the actual upper material. And it causes it to either go into your sock or causes it to, evaporate if you are running or, you know, on a hot day. That's basically what the purpose here is, for that breathability. With the Flyknit here, this Flyknit is not nearly as synthetic and made in the same way as the Atom Knit, and this will more or less absorb a little bit more water if need be, but it's obviously a cheaper material for Nike, in my opinion, to produce. And in that case, this is why it's being used on this shoe. And of course, I don't have a bad experience with this Flyknit. I remember when the Vaporfly Flyknit was out, I think in 2017, 2018. I liked running in that shoe. This is a very similar upper to that, and it's pretty good overall. Another major difference, of course, is the shoelaces that come stock with the shoe. This one's using a lot more of a serrated, kind of a bumpy shoelace on the Alphafly, which helps the lockdown and you tying your shoe ultimately to have the tightest, no strings attached, pun intended, lock to this shoe. Whereas here, it's just, you know, a basic shoelace. You can play around with it. It won't be too tight if you don't make it super tight. So you kind of have some breathing room in there. Another major difference, of course, as you can probably guess, is the weight of the shoes. If I'm not mistaken, this shoe in 8.5 is about 7.4 or 7.3 ounces to be exact. It's very light, but it's not nearly as light as something like the Vaporfly Next Percent. But at that point, it's an apples and oranges comparison, and in this case, that additional weight brings a little bit more to the table, in my opinion, in terms of a springy feel for this shoe. Whereas the Tempo Next Percent is about 10 ounces, which is like 310 grams on average. And the reason for that, my guess, is that the React foam and the additional pieces that are kind of in play with this shoe are basically just adding a little bit more weight. So that being said, the Tempo Next Percent weighs a little bit more than the Alphafly, most likely from the React foam, but in a way it's kind of a good thing, because the nylon plate, then it needs a little bit more force to have the same simulation, in my opinion, as a carbon plate in the Alphafly. So you do have to work a little bit harder to have a similar feel, but that's kind of, you know, the apples oranges pieces of the shoe. So this is where I kind of go into the video, obviously saying that despite the differences and the similarities of the shoes, if you're a non-elite runner and you were to race with something like the Tempo Next Percent, if it was your only option, it's totally doable, in the sense that, yes, there's a lot of differences between the shoes, but the general principle of this shoe, using this technology with the AirPods, ZoomX compression and decompression as the propulsion of the shoe, you're still going to have a very similar feel, although you're going to have to work just that smidgen harder to have a similar feel to the Alphafly. All of this is contingent to the fact that you need to be a midfoot striker, obviously, to activate the pods in the shoes. Otherwise, it's just going to feel like every other shoe. And that is especially true here with the Alphafly, that if you heel strike in the Alphafly, you're going to sink so deep into the ZoomX that I almost don't recommend you running or racing with this type of shoe unless you can guarantee that midfoot or even forefoot strike to activate the pods. Now, I've talked about this before. I know I've had commenters tell me in the past that this trainer cannot be used by elites whatsoever, because it has a 41 millimeter stack height in the heel. And because the rules, I believe, for triathlon and like the marathon associations, I don't remember all the acronyms and the alphabet soups for them, is about 40 millimeters, this shoe is technically illegal to race in. So it makes it very interesting that your trainer also has a higher stack height than the actual RACER itself. Now, that being said, is it still a good trainer for the Alphafly? I think ultimately, by principle, it is, and on paper it should be as well. It does have a slightly different feel in the sense that, at least from my personal experience, I've been taking less steps per minute in this shoe to run faster, whereas in the Alphafly, I'll take more steps per minute and still run faster. Maybe it's just, again, it's because the shoe is light, I'm not dragging it. Maybe there's a placebo effect because you're like, all right, I'm in a racing shoe, let's do this. And you're just having an ultimately like a good time with it. But in a weird way, both shoes can perform very similarly in terms of your maximum potential and performance in them if you know how to operate in both shoes accordingly. So, that being said, again, it's an obvious answer. You definitely want to race in this shoe. You probably want to train in this one. But if you didn't have an Alphafly as an option, you can totally race in this if you're a non-elite athlete. And I would totally race in this as well if I didn't have the Alphafly. But because I have the Alphafly and like a pair of Vaporfly Next Percents and Brooks Hyperion Elite, I'm not necessarily going to race in a pseudo speed trainer racing simulation shoe ultimately. But, of course, despite all the differences within the shoes, I would still definitely stand on the laurels that Nike did a good job of creating this trainer for the Alphafly, despite some of the questionable, designs within the shoe. So in this particular case, I think I've had this in a previous video, both of the right pods in my right foot are taking very similar damage, except the lifespan of one is worse than the other, whereas this one has almost 200 miles. This one has just about 100 plus. It kind of tells you this weird story ultimately of the lifespan of these shoes. And out of a trainer, I would expect more. And again, I've made dozens of videos on the Tempo Next Percent now. If you want to see my whole recap on them, I'll link some videos here talking about critical mass damage that I had on, the mangoes here. And just basically talking about my thoughts on them ultimately. But seeing it roll over into the Alphafly at 100 plus miles has me a little bit worried. But again, this is the name of the game. If you want a racing shoe, you race in it. If you want a daily trainer, you have to have something that's a little bit heavier, a little bit more life, and basically that's just the name of the game. You're paying $1 per mile in some of these shoes, whereas the Alphafly, you might be paying like $1.10, $1.20 per mile, plus racing costs and whatnot, and then the Tempo Next Percent, it's just going to be a little bit cheaper from there. So, I don't know, that's just how you weigh it out. But yeah, overall summary, I like both shoes a lot. I think the similarities definitely outweigh the differences, by principle being that, they're AirPod shoes with a mid-foot, forefoot kind of potential in the strikes. And one does help you simulate the Alphafly ultimately during like a race day simulation. Just the trick is be wary of the weights of the shoes so that you will develop more steps per minute in the Alphafly than the Tempo Next Percent, in my personal case and in my opinion. So, I think I'm going to leave it off there. If you guys agree with my assessment on both shoes, just leave me a comment below. Again, if you guys see the things a little bit differently, if you've raced with a Tempo Next Percent and liked it more than the Alphafly, definitely also let me know in the comments. If you have the greatest wallet in the world and all you do is train in the Alphaflys, just hit me up in a DM. I want to be your friend, alright? So anyways, that's where I think I'm going to leave this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys real soon.